Adam, I really am so delighted to welcome you to this edition of my Hopecast. And because I've watched some of your films, I have a great admiration for you. So I think our conversation is going to be absolutely fabulous. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jane. And I'm thrilled to be here, a long time admirer of your work. And I can't wait to chop it up with you. Let's get into a conversation.
Yeah, well, I think, the reason that we're actually talking now is because of Don't Look Up. And the reason we don't have Netflix at home here, and I'm in the home I grew up in, uh, and I've been here sort of grounded since the pandemic began, because my team won't let me travel. They say they want me whole and healthy and all the rest of it. And so I got a message from Leonardo DiCaprio, and he said, "Jane, you must watch Don't Look Up." And
Oh,
so we
wow.
took out a whatever you call it for Netflix, and I watched Don't Look Up, and I was very, very impressed by that film. And then I read some of the reviews, and I was utterly shocked. I thought, how can this person who's meant to be intelligent say, well, the film was lousy because it didn't pinpoint oil and gas companies? And I mean, it's not meant to be that sort of a film. It's a sort of farcical film which has such very close ties to reality because although it looks farcical in many places, that's how people have been behaving in a farcical way. So I just want to congratulate you, Adam, because that film is fantastic. Quite honestly, I think it's amazing.
Thank you, Jane. And yeah, the responses to the film I've loved, whether they're positive or angry, whatever they are. I think we're living in a time right now that is so hard to define. There's so much misinformation, there's so much confusion, there's so much emotion about what we're going through right now. So, I never expected this movie to be the kind of movie where they lift you on your shoulders and, confetti rains down. So it's been great. It's been great hearing from the climate scientists, even the epidemiologists who have experienced some of this, and then people like yourself who have different views of the world. That's kind of what we were going for.
Well, personally, I think that you have been lifted up onto people's shoulders and lots of confetti has rained down. And the people who have not rained down the confetti are people that I fail to understand. And there's rather too many of those people on the planet today. And, I mean, we've gone through this, I don't know how many years of fake news, and it's blinded people to the facts of science. And to me, it's shocking. It's like if people really honestly don't believe the science, if they're not just saying that, but if they really and truly think that the science is lying, then who are these people and what is the hope for the future?
Well, I think you just put your finger right on the main obstacle that we're all facing when it comes to the fact that we, scientifically, as a fact, we are living through the sixth great extinction. We're also, as an empirical fact, living through the collapse of the livable climate. And I think what you see is, I got to work with Michael Lewis on The Big Short, and he always talks about incorrect incentives. And I think that's really what our world is riddled with at this moment, where you have, news media that is taking money from fossil fuel companies for advertising. You have political leaders that have to get elected because they take donations from these fossil fuel companies and these destructive companies. And I would even go inside the fossil fuel companies. I would even say the way that the corporate construct, the legal construct of a corporation mandates that you must only care about the share value, the stock value of a company. And I think we're in a very frightening place right now where all these befouled incentives are colliding to create, a cultural consensus, a media consensus that without exaggeration, is killing us.
Yeah, it is.
I think our biggest issue, which you talked about before, is communicating the science and
Yeah.
getting over the corruption that exists with our leaders and to some degree our media.
The problem with the media is that they say they're unbiased, but actually they're not. And it depends who they are. It depends which channel. It depends which newspaper. And we all know that. I mean, we know if you go to Fox News, you'll get a different kind of truth than if you go to BBC World. Um, so we're living in a very, very fascinating time, and we've got all of this, social media, which we've never had before. So you can have a social media outlet and you can put out an untruth, and that untruth will just go whizzing around, and people start repeating it and repeating it, and in the end, they don't know where it began. So it's passed on as truth. In the same way, you can have something that's true that's passed on as fake news. So we're living in this time, which is, it's actually, if you were a historian in 100 years, looking back on it, my goodness, how fascinating it would be. But how is this going to play out? And that's, I think, the kind of story, Adam, that your films can really pick up on and create into some kind of drama that will help people to understand what's going on, to understand the power in both positive and negative ways of social media. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? Don't you think?
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. There's a great podcast out there called The Fall of Civilizations that tracks all the great civilizations for the last, 15,000 years in human history. And if you look at, and then it tracks why they collapsed. These
Yeah.
were civilizations that lasted for, in some cases, thousands of years, in most cases, hundreds of years. And if you look at every single one of the stories, it's always three things: it's income inequality, it's the people at the top saying, I want more, and they neglect the people. So it breaks that sort of compact of trust. And then it's some sort of climactic change. I mean, back then it was smaller, it was a river changing course, a little bit of a heat wave. And then the third thing, it was some sort of people coming from over the horizon line with a new technology, whether it was the longbow or long spears or whatever, that would take down these civilizations. And if you look where we're at right now, we're really looking at all three. We have a new weapon, which is information warfare, which we are not equipped to deal with. It has been put into hyperdrive. We are
Yeah.
being coerced, distracted, manipulated, turned against each other in a way that we never could have imagined. And you can tell it works really well because if you point it out, people get mad and say, what do you mean? I make up my own mind. And then the second thing is obviously income inequality. The elites at the top have decided they deserve a bigger cut. And what they've done to the vast majority of people is they've left them without living wages, without resources, without a ladder to climb up, without opportunity. You can't do that. And then, of course, the big looming shadow over all of this is we are headed towards the most cataclysmic event in human history, which is the collapse of the livable climate. not to mention the sixth great extinction, which we are empirically living through right now. So it's a crazy time, but I always find if I hold those three pillars, if I just remember those three pillars are the truth, that we know that that working people are being ripped off. We know that information has been weaponized in a way we've never imagined. And we know as an empirical fact that the livable climate is collapsing at a much greater rate than we ever imagined. If you can operate from those three, you can start to navigate yourself through this world. So that's what we're trying to do with these movies and these TV shows is wend our way through the chaos.
And it is chaos. And when you think about some of the world is not a very peaceful place right now, and there are uprisings among the people who are deprived people who've been pushed under as the elite get more and the gap between those that have not gets bigger. And that is actually underlying, I think, the rift in society in many different countries.
I think the story we constantly get corralled into this us versus them pen, but the real story has always been for thousands of years it's a big blob of money and power, and this us versus them stuff is a way to divide us. And I'm hoping here in the States people start to wake up.
There are CEOs and CEOs and CEOs, and they're all different and they behave differently. And some of them are so really on the same page as you and I have been talking about the need to improve the lifestyle of their employees along the chain, to improve the conditions of the people, the communities where they're getting their products from. More and more companies are moving in that direction.
I really am a big believer that every person is good. That if you look, even like medically, when we're productive, when we're loving, when we're connected, we do better. We live longer. I think without a doubt, people are good. When they're not, when they're destructive, when they're working against the common good, they tend to not be as happy. They tend to not smile. They tend to not laugh.
I had to go into the medical research labs to see for myself how the chimps were being so
Oh,
horribly, horribly mistreated. It was the worst thing I've ever had to do. Our closest living relative in a 5 foot by 5 foot cage, there because their bodies are so like ours, and just being used as experimental guinea pigs, so to speak. I had to go in, and and when I had to face the NIH people who were responsible the first time I went in, I didn't know what to say. I mean, there they were sitting around the table, and there was me having just seen with my own eyes this horror. And so, what am I going to say to them when I was trying to fight my tears? So, what I said to them was, I imagine that every caring, compassionate person will feel as I feel about the conditions that I've just seen. Well, they couldn't say they weren't caring and compassionate, could they? Not really. And so we had a conversation, and that eventually led to more conversations, and it led to sitting down and working out what could be done and how change could be made. And you know something, Adam? After that, I was attacked and blackballed by the animal rights community, who said, how can you sit down with those people? How can you talk to them? How can you have a cup of tea with them? And I said, if you don't talk to people, how can you ever expect them to change? So I learned very early on, the way that you have to move in this very difficult world. And I learned that life isn't black and white, and that sometimes compromise must be made, various compromises, as long as you don't compromise your values.
so true. I mean, I agree. I really feel like there is a beautiful human animal, planet Earth creature connection between all of us. And you could just see it in a million different examples, whether it's the way someone loves a dog, the way someone loves a child, the way someone loves certain things in their life, like a good meal with family. These are commonalities, and you could look at the greatest monsters in history, and they still enjoyed those experiences. And I think you're right. Like violent attacks against these people. I mean, there is, I mean, what's scary about this is there is going to be a point, and I hope we don't get there, where this is so dangerous, what's happening with the climate. And I don't know, we may already be there. I'm a big believer in peaceful civil disobedience. I like what Extinction Rebellion is doing, blocking streets, blocking the gears of production. I support that 100%. But as this gets worse and worse, I don't think these people in these boardrooms and these shareholders and these companies realize how bad this is going to get, because it's going to be about people's lives. So the approach you're talking about, that's an amazing story where you went in there and you connected with them as humans. And by the way, Jane, can I ask you, what was the result of that?
Well, it was a long, long battle, but there are no more chimpanzees in medical research in the United States, and I don't believe anywhere in the world, possibly China, but if in that case it's very secret, but everywhere else. But you know the interesting thing about this? The reason that the National Institute of Health decided to retire all their 400 plus chimpanzees into sanctuaries wasn't just on ethical grounds. It was because not one single experiment that was being done was either beneficial or potentially beneficial to human health. And that's the case with all of these animal experiments. Animals aren't people. And if chimpanzees, who share 98.7% of our DNA, aren't reliable indicators of a medical treatment being good for us, then how different it will be for dogs and cats and guinea pigs and rats and mice. And there are so many alternatives now, and we're jumping off the theme again, but there are, and you've said this earlier, we are at a stage where we are so we have access to knowledge and understanding that we didn't have before, and we just have to use that and help us move in the right direction, and help corporations understand that they can do really well if they give more than they take. And I don't know, have you seen Paul Pullman's recent book, Net Positive? Because if you haven't, you would enjoy reading it. And if Unilever can move in that direction, other corporations can as well. And they are beginning to. That's the hope. I have this hope that there is change. And, a lot of the change is due to young people, like in our Roots and Shoots program, changing the way their parents think and their grandparents think.
I mean, the crazy thing about it is, if these corporate boards and CEOs are dedicated to increasing their stock value, the course they're on is disastrous. I mean, it is
Yes.
headed towards the biggest bubble collapse ever. But one of the things I learned about with The Big Short is that's not the way these guys think. And let's face it, most of them are guys. And that's not the way they think. They think about getting their own bonus and getting out the door. And that's what drove the '07, '08 collapse, was that no one's thinking long term, because legally, the way our corporate structures and our stock exchanges are constructed, they're really built on a quarterly structure where you get your bonuses, you get your money, and you get out. And that's the problem. I mean, the story of the Iroquois natives here in the US, where they used to use a seventh generation model,
Yeah.
where every decision they made had to be accounted against 7 generations. So I also think part of this is going to be we're going to have to change the legal construct of what a corporation is. I've talked about this with friends before that we're so afraid of artificial intelligence and AI. But in fact, AI may already exist, but it exists within the legal paperwork of what a corporation is, because corporations use humans in ways that aren't human. They use
True.
humans in
Yes.
ways that destroy humans. So I think we got to take a long, hard look at that as well.
Shareholders are beginning to change and demand more ethical behavior on the part of the companies who they are supporting. So, given that the world is gradually changing, given that there is more awareness of the environmental problems that we face, the devastating environmental problems that we face, you chose to end Don't Look Up as the end. Why did you choose to do that?
So, our approach to the movie was we were asking a lot of questions. And one of the questions we were asking is, are the stories we're telling now representative of the world we're living in now? So the operating idea behind the movie was that they're not, that we're in a different era and we're confronting different challenges than we've confronted for the last 50, 60 years. And so a big part of the idea was that we're used to third acts, the last part of a movie working out okay, especially, people forget Don't Look Up is mostly a comedy, a ridiculous comedy. And we're very used to that ending being happy. So that was something from the beginning that I wanted to do. I wanted to break that tradition and end with an ending that was not per the storytelling formula. And because the goal of the movie was not, it's just a movie, so it can only do so much. And the goal of the movie was to give people a kick in the pants, to allow people to laugh about the craziness of the last 5 or 10 years, because I believe when we're all laughing together, there's community, and to instill a sense of urgency, but also to feel emotion about what we could lose. And I love that ending because the line from Leonardo DiCaprio that he says at the end of the movie. This is a spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie. He says, "We really did have it all, didn't we?"
Mm.
And that's it. And I feel like that's the gratitude, that's the grief, that's the love, that's the connection that we're missing right now. And that's due in large part to a bunch of different factors, whether it's our phones and social media and greed and profitization and splintering our communities. But that was really the goal of that ending. But once again, movies can only do so much. So there are a lot of other stories to be told about this.
Yep. And, I sort of want to jump in at the end of your movie that I think the message I would have is this is what's going to happen if we don't get together and take action now, that we still have a window of time. We have more than the 6 months of your movie, but not that much longer. And if we just continue sitting and looking back and saying, well, it's nothing to do with me, then that ending that you showed so dramatically could be reality. Therefore, we've got to muscle up and get together and make the change that we can if we will.
I mean, that's it. And I think, I have a lot of friends who are very intelligent people, good intentioned. And what I see over and over again is people don't understand how tight this time frame is. And there was just a release of a climate model from a group called Climate Analytics that projects that by the year 2030, 50% of our days will be once every 100-year heat events. And I read this And I reread it and I reread it and I talked to scientist friends of mine. I'm like, am I missing something? And they're like, no, you're not missing anything. And then I turned on my broadcast news and I read my, print news. Now it's online. And I didn't see one single mention of this story. That is a massive story if you really think about the fact that half of our days will be the hottest day you have ever experienced. And by the way, that doesn't mean certain days won't be even hotter. That means trees will dry up. That means fires will be way more frequent. It will shut off power. If there's humidity, it will create wet bulb events. So this is 8 years away. So I think everyone wants to do the right thing. I think everyone is confused by a lot of nonsense and BS that we're hit with through commercials, through our leaders talking out the sides of their mouth. But that is a scientific model from a reputable group. And from the other scientists I've spoken to, they're still peer reviewing it. It seems very likely. And that alone should scare us and at the same time give us a focus and action that we need right now.
Yes, and impel us to tell the stories of the change that can be and is being made, because otherwise people just lose hope and say, well, if this is going to happen, there's nothing I can do about it. So the message is every single one of us can make some kind of impact every day. And if we get together and if we take heed of what science is telling us, if we think about what is changing around the world because of people's actions, then that gives you the energy and the hope to move ahead, to counteract this doom and gloom that is real, that's real. But we don't just want to sit and say, well, in 2030 that's the end. We want to say we've got those years to try and make change, right?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, here's the difference. If this was, 2030, this thing is going to happen and we have no answer, well, then maybe we should all be praying and having dinners and hugging each other. What's crazy about all of this is we have the answer. We
Yes,
have
that's it.
renewable energy. It's cheaper than fossil
Yeah, yeah,
fuels.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We have brilliant scientists who are willing to dive into carbon removal. We have brilliant engineers who are willing to help us build seawalls and none of these things by themselves are a single answer, except maybe the renewables. But like that's what's crazy about it. We're laying in our house. Our house is on fire
Yeah.
and the stairwell is clean and the front door is clean. And what we're doing right now is we're just laying in bed saying, oh no, it's just smoke. It's probably incense. Or we're laying in bed saying, well, there's nothing I can do. There is a lot we can do, but we got to shake these leaders, these media people, these corporations. We got to shake them hard.
And we've got to shake our own behavior. That's key too. And we've got to stop intensive agriculture, and we've got to do rewilding, and we've got to do all these things that are helping the natural world survive and recover. We've got to plant trees, protect forests. We've got to clean up the ocean, because all these things are helping to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So we know what we have to do, as you say. Let's get together and do it. And I think your films might help us to move in that direction, because people watch movies and they watch your movies, and you get the Leonardos in there, and more people will watch. Make the movies that help people understand we have a chance, but only if we take action.
Yeah, I mean, like it or not, whatever job you do, whether you're a lawyer, a gardener, a singer, a hairstylist, we're all now climate hairstylist, climate lawyer. I'm a
Yeah.
climate filmmaker. Right? Whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, that is what is happening. So, Jane's right. In your own personal way, filter it through, and then put a tremendous amount of pressure on our corporate leaders, and media, because they've got the gears of power. We vote for them, but we got to really shake them, and we got to remind them the way Jane talked about, where she went in and talked to the people that were using chimpanzees for testing, and she appealed to them as human beings. We got to do that. And sometimes it's got to be gentle, sometimes it's got to be forceful, sometimes it's got to be loud. Never should it be violent, of course, that never works. But we got to put our bodies on the line for ourselves. We used to say years ago it was for our grandchildren and grandchildren. It's not anymore. It's for us right now. And the smoke, the fires, the wet bulb events, the rising waters, the storms, all this stuff is coming right this second.
Fortunately, we are being helped by the young people who are changing their parents and their grandparents every single day. That's my biggest hope for the future.
That's part of it as well. That's part of it as well.
I think, Adam, the way you ended the movie was perfect, because that is the way the world could end. And the poet said, the world will end not with a bang, but a whimper, but actually the world could end with a bang. And, my great hope is that the young people have become so aware, they have become so informed, they are taking action every day, so many of them, to make change. They've understood that it's up to each and every individual. And so many of these young people have parents or grandparents or uncles or something like that in these corporations, in government, and so on. And so, the alternative ending to the movie, which isn't the one you should have done, but there could be an alternative ending, which would be that all the young people persuade us to interact with the world in a different way, to take actions that we're not taking, but we know we could. And that if science and nature are allowed to work together, we could have a different ending to a movie like that. But that's it's two different endings. I mean, there are books written for children which show, if you go along this path, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you turn the book upside down and it shows you take a different path, and the ending is a good one instead of a bad one. So you could have that sort of dual ending to a movie like yours.
I mean, the ending, I guess you could have done would be when the president, played by Meryl Streep, turned the mission around. You would have had 20, 30 million people flooding Washington, D.C., calling for her impeachment. And maybe even if the Congress wouldn't go with it, just removing her from office, and because she clearly wasn't qualified at that point. And I would say the same thing now, given the empirical science that we have. Any leader that doesn't take this seriously is not qualified to hold office. And that's not me, Adam McKay, saying that. That's empirical, peer reviewed, known science. If there is a leader that's hedging on this, they are not qualified to hold office.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there's many leaders who are not qualified at all in many countries today. But, my hope, I keep saying, it's the young people who are beginning to understand, who it's their future. So, of course, they're passionate. And as they get more understanding, their actions are more precise. And I always share with them my reasons for hope is partly them, partly that if you give nature a chance, it's very resilient. Places we've destroyed can once again be taken over by nature and can bring back biodiversity. And, this intellect, and we've talked about that, the intellect where we know what we can do, we can make change if we will. And, that's really important. And then there's the indomitable human spirit, the people who simply won't take no for an answer. They won't give in, they won't give up, and they do everything they jolly well can to make change in the way that they know how. So those are the hopeful endings. But we definitely need endings like your Don't Look Up, because that could happen. That could.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've tracked this, they've modeled this. We know exactly what's going to happen.
Yep.
And it's going to start with where we're at now, with increased storms, Category 5 storms,
Yes. Yep.
crazy fires around the planet, wet
Yep.
bulb events, which if you don't know what those are, look them up. They're horrific. I actually
Yep.
lived through one in Chicago in the 90s. And we're going to see all of that happen. Power outages. When the temperature gets above a certain threshold, planes can't take off because the
Yep.
heat is moving so much it can't take off. So we know where we're going. And eventually that'll lead to the collapse of civilization.
We have a window of time when we can make change now if we all get together, if we use the scientific knowledge that we have, if we all act in a way that gives each one of us a light ecological footprint. We can change the trajectory which led to the bleak ending in your movie. We can change that.
We can definitely do it. I mean, we've
Yep.
seen what mankind can do when
Yes.
we really get behind something.
Yep.
And there's no question, with concentrated effort, with lots of resources behind the science right this second, we are
Yep.
running out of time, but
Yep.
we can do it. And I just call on everyone not to tolerate this. Make it your number one priority. I'm a filmmaker. I'm not making this up. It's like I've spoken to scientists. Jane is a scientist. Jane has seen the effects of this with her chimpanzees in their habitat. She's seen it. This is all well documented. But if you're going through your day and you're stressed about 5 different things, this is the thing to be stressed about. And then to quickly pivot from stress towards action. Action is so wonderful and freeing. It really is a wonderful thing. It's worse to be in a cage of anxiety, feel powerless. But when you really start taking action, it is one of the best feelings in the world.
No question. No question. I meet people who are deeply depressed and they say, well, the world's falling to pieces. There's nothing I can do about it. And I say, well, we have this expression, think globally, act locally. But no, if you think globally, you get depressed. So twist it around. What can you do in your area? You can clear up trash. You can get people to help you. You can plant organic food. You can do all sorts of things. And the great thing is that when we do something and see that it makes a difference, it makes us feel good. If you feel good, you want to do more. You want to feel better. And as you go, you take other people with you, and then you dare think globally, knowing that all around the world there are people just like you taking these local actions, and that's going to make the world a better place. So that, I think, is, it's a good point to end discussions about the future, that we as individuals can make a difference. And you as a filmmaker, I mean, you influence millions of people with your films. So you as an individual make a lot more difference than somebody who's a road sweeper. They can make their own little difference. You can impact the world.
Absolutely. Each one of us is a concentric circle of influence. We have ourselves, we have the people we love, we have our community, our town, and then we vote for our leaders, we buy our products, and just hit every one of those concentric circles. And Jane is 100% right. It will start to feel good. Why doesn't your local school have solar panels on it? Why is your town still using gas cars? Why, if you have the money, I know some people don't. Why are you still using a gas car? Why are you still eating red meat 20 times a month? I mean, honestly, reducing red meat is a big thing. It really is. So there's all these little things we can do. But I really just, this movie and this experience really lit me up in a way that just looking at the truth is empowering, that it's so much more stressful to avoid the truth, to hear a bunch of claptrap and misinformation. And I'll always choose just being aware of what's going on. So that's a good place to start. If you're wondering where to start, do a bunch of reading. Get the books, go online, ask questions, and you'll feel the energy build.
Well, Adam, I think that we have used up our allotted time, which is very sad because I could go on talking to you for ages. But I just want to thank you so very much for agreeing to have this conversation. And I've gained a lot from it. So thank you. And next time, I hope we meet in person.
That would be wonderful. And most of all, what a thrill to speak with you as a great admirer of your work, and specifically to talk about this subject and to hear your point of view as someone who's gone up against the scientific establishment and changed the way we view the world. You give me a lot of hope. You give me a lot of spirit.
All right. Well, I think we've helped each other then in that case. So thank you, Adam, very much.